Today I'm going to review this pen. This is a new pen from Noodler's Ink, the Neponset, and I am super excited to talk about it. As of this recording, it came out either last week or the week before. I've had mine for about a week, and I've been using it quite a bit, and it's really fascinating. So the owner of Noodler's Ink, Nathan Tardif, as he usually does, he issued himself a challenge when designing this pen. When he designed the Ahab, he challenged himself to make an affordable flex pen with a steel nib. And people can debate on the success of that. I personally think he was quite successful. It flexes a lot, it's affordable. For this pen, he wanted to make an affordable as he could pen with a music nib. Now, a lot of people watching might know what a music nib is, but if you don't, regular nibs have two tines, and they're spaced slightly apart, and when the ink flows between them. When they're pushed to the paper with pressure, they can expand, if you're careful, allowing it for a wider line. A music nib, like the one here, and I'll show you a close-up when I show you the parts of the pen, has three tines. So when pressure is applied, it opens kind of like that, making for a wider line from a very fine, or a fine to a very wide line. And they're designed to do that. Usually they're quite expensive, and usually they're made of gold. He has made one out of steel, and for a reasonable price considering the kind of pen that you get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the pieces of the pen. I'm going to talk about them a little bit. I'm going to give this pen some ratings out of 5. I'm going to rate the design, the comfort, and the writing experience. I'm going to do a writing sample, and then we'll be done. Okay, so these are the parts of the pen. Before I move on, I should just mention this pen is made of ebonite, which is interesting because it's a material that they originally made pens out of. It is a kind of hard rubber, and it's what they used before they invented plastic. It's also very keeping with Nathan's kind of philosophy of this pen of keeping it pretty vintage. As an example, this is a Waterman's Ideal that was made in 1919, and you can see where Nathan Tardif is getting his aesthetic cues from. This was, I imagine, a fair bit redder, or deeper red, over almost 100 years ago when it was first made. Back to this pen. The color of this pen is Red Rebellion. It also comes in chestnut, walnut, which are browns, green, which I actually quite like, solid black. This one's my favorite though, and that worked out because that was the one I was able to get. Start with the cap. It's a bullet-shaped cap. Tapers down there. It has it's a silver chrome band that says Noodler's Ink. Nothing else. The clip says Noodler's Ink. I think this might be the same clip as a Conrad, I'm not sure, but it's definitely not the Ahab clip, which is shaped like the whale. Nice and springy. It doesn't feel as firm as some of them, but I have a fair amount of confidence in it. The ring there for when it goes on, and this end of the cap, which I'm sure unscrews, so you can get at that. I've never tried it. Then we have the barrel, which is rounded and one solid piece of ebonite. So I guess you can make this into an eyedropper. I'm not sure how ebonite reacts to ink, but I think it must be fine since the original pens were ebonite and they were eyedropper pens. But as you can see, one solid piece, and the color is great, actually. I like it a lot. That one is big. Look at the size of that in my hand. This is bigger than the Ahab, which is a big pen. Then you get the section. These threads are actually quite smooth. They don't bother me. And then you have the section, which is about as big as I would like it to be. I wouldn't like it much bigger. The narrowest thing is 11 millimeters, but still comfortable because of the shape where it flares out at the end, which keeps you from sliding down. The converter on this is the same converter as in the Ahab, which I like because I need put some ink in there, I guess. but I like because it's got a fair amount of capacity, and it's just a plunger. You push that in, pull it out, it sucks up ink like a syringe. Really elegant. It does a great job. Simple, easy to maintain. It is supposed to come with an O-ring here. Mine did not for some reason. I wondered if maybe he changed that from when he designed the AHEB, but when you look at the paperwork or the writings that come with this, it shows an O-ring there. So I didn't get one. That's okay. There was plenty of silicone grease in there, and I can always replenish that from my own silicone grease. Now we get to the nib, which is the star of this pen, really. And you can see clearly here the 3 tines. So while most pens would have a single slit down the center and 2 pieces, this has one here and one there, and 2 tiny little breather holes down near the bottom. And this allows it to have a fair bit of flex. So when you push on it, can you see? It opens up quite a bit. You'll see more in the writing sample. Anyways, it is a really fascinating nib. It is a fair size, not gigantic, but a fair size, and really simple. It says, I believe Noodler's ink at the bottom, but that's pushed down into the section. It's just friction fit. You can pull it right out. The feed you can't see underneath, but has 2 air channels where most feeds have 1. This allows for more ink flow because these music nibs push out a lot more ink than a normal nib does. So those are the pieces of the pen. On to the ratings. For design, I rate this pen a 4 out of 5. There is a lot I really like about it. I like the fact that it's ebonite. I like the vintage look and feel. The trim is okay. I like it. The cigar shape, or as Nathan put it, the blimp shape, is not my favorite shape for a pen, but it suits this one. I like the fact that the section is the same material as the body. They're both the rippled ebonite. I like the nib. The nib is fascinating. I like the fact that Nathan is challenging the pen industry to think differently about making pens and challenging us to think differently about pens. His philosophy really resonates with me. I like the converter. I think that one has a very simple yet elegant design. There's a lot to like about this pen. And the color. The color's great. I'm not the biggest fan of the other ebonite colors, like the brownish, like I think one's called walnut. I can't remember the other one. This one is the rebel red, and it was the only color that Wonder Pens here in Toronto had, but even so, this is a color I would have chosen. So design-wise, 4 out of 5, really, really like it. So for comfort, I give it a 3.5. Fits really nicely in my hand, the size. Weight's okay, it's not too heavy because of the ebonite. You can post it, but it gets gigantic, but not top heavy, but I still never do this, which is fine. I don't need to post my pens. The only issue I have is that this section feels a little bit big for my hands. I'm sure lots of people like it, but that's actually saved by the fact that it's got a hourglass shape to it. So your fingers don't slide down. They sit right where you want them to be. Really, so pretty comfortable. Not the most comfortable pen I've ever used, but pretty comfortable. So for writing experience, I give this pen a 4.5. It is really fascinating. You'll see it in the writing sample, but the flex is impressive, and you don't need to put as much pressure onto it to flex just slightly to give your writing a little bit of interest or flair, as much as you need to, say, with the AHEB, which I found needed a lot more pressure to get past the fine line. It is not the smoothest nib, but it's not going to be the smoothest nib because of the nature of it. But the fact that it is a music nib is really kind of quite fascinating, and the feed keeps up with it. So I'm going to give you some measurements and we'll be done. So length is 152.5 millimeters. Unposted is 132 millimeters. Posted is a whopping 179 millimeters. The section is 11 millimeters at the very narrowest, and the weight has a bit of ink in it, but it comes in at 22 grams. Writing samples next. Okay, now for the writing sample. So this is the Noodler's ink. Neponset pen, and the ink is of course Noodler's Apache Sunset. Because when you have an ink that shades this nicely and a pen that flexes, it is a wonderful thing. So let's try some writing. Once upon a time, there was a, I guess it would be an airship called the Neponset, which is of course the airship that this pen was named after. And I don't think I mentioned actually, but this nib actually has a name. It is the Vishnu Victory music nib, and Nathan Tardif named it after the soldiers from India who fought in the Second World War. So the writing was relatively smooth. It has some feedback. You can hear it when you write, but not really unpleasant. I find that going up is a little almost scratchy, not quite. But I wonder if that'll just kind of work its way out as you go. Let's try writing quickly. Not being legible, but just trying to see if the feed keeps up, and it does, which is not surprising because this feed is designed to deliver a lot of ink for when people are flexing. Speaking of which, let's see what we can do here. So that is normal. So that would be a fine line, a Western. Some Japanese pens might call that almost a medium. It's not as fine as the Ahab, but see how far we can push this. So there's a little bit of railroading, but you can see it can go quite far. I just got this pen, so I haven't really worked out the right speed at which I can max flex it. Make sure there's ink in the feed. But it does flex quite wide. And so let's see. Let's do so. Let's try some flex writing. So I'm getting a little bit of railroad in here. Let's see if I can. Prime the feed and get it to go a little bit more. So then there's lots of ink in that feed. Let's see if we can get it to keep up. There we go. And as you can see, those are huge bubbles of ink that are coming out there. That is a lot of ink coming out of there. You shouldn't necessarily have to prime the feed like that, but then again, that is extreme flexing. And there's certain things you can do to make this keep up more. Like if you put a piece of tape across the top, apparently, it acts as like an overfeed, which will keep more ink on there. But that's not really that necessary. One thing I find is that it flexes a little easier with a little bit less pressure than the Ahab does. So when you're writing normally, if you're not looking for mega flex, you can have a fair bit of line variation as you go, get a lot of shading of ink like this without too much effort. Like I'm not pushing that hard. which makes it, I actually find it a little more useful as a flux pen than the Ahab for that reason. So there's that. Can you write in the reverse? I actually haven't tried. It is right in the reverse. It is very scratchy. I find that if I look at the times, they don't necessarily always go back to perfectly in line. One the middle one seems to sit slightly higher sometimes, but maybe that's just because of the way that I was pushing it. But as you can see, there is a lot of flux to be had. Wetness, even just writing normally, there's enough ink coming out. It's not super wet like that, but as you can see, when you push it, the ink just kind of pours out of it, which is lovely. And anything else? I think that's about it. So, like the Ahab, it is nice to draw with. Again, this is not really a drawing ink, if you ask me, but if I had a black ink in here, you'd be getting a lot of variation, and I also feel relatively confident putting a high carbon like ink in here, like something more bulletproof and water resistant to put watercolor washes over top because of the nature of this pen, completely disassembled just like the Ahab, so you can feel more confident putting, as long as you clean it. This is very easy to clean, so you can put that kind of ink in there. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, hit the like button. Any questions or comments, leave the comments below. And feel free to subscribe to the channel. There's plenty of videos on there, plenty more coming. But until then, yeah, it's a lot of fun to write with. And you can get pretty wide before you start to railroad. Alright.